Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk about the boom-bust cycle. Why driven athletes like you fall into this issue. I've done a few shorts on the boom-bust cycle already, but I want to expand on that today and go into a little bit more depth as to why this is a common issue for people who have recurring issues. So amateur athletes, fitness enthusiasts, active individuals who are all really keen to try and get results in training. They're driven, hardworking. They just keep seeming to have these recurring issues flaring up over and over again. The boom-bust cycle can be very frustrating for a lot of people, and the reason is because what you're going to do is you train really hard, then you get injured, then you take time off, and then you go back to that same recurring cycle over and over again. Hence the boom and the bust. When you're unaware of this boom-bust cycle, it seems like you're just having bad luck over and over again. It's like, my body's injury prone. I always get injured. Something that is just going to happen to me. I'm fragile. I just can't get this right. The thing is that this is actually a predictable pattern. And once you realize that, you're going to be able to drag yourself out of it and then get your training load right so that you can improve and not have recurring issues over and over again. What exactly is the boom-bust cycle? First part of this is the boom. This is where you're training really hard, motivation's really high, you're being consistent with your sessions, you're super disciplined, and that's awesome because that's what we need to build habits for good training and good consistent training over time. However, this quickly becomes a bust when pain starts to flare up, you get injured, and then training just stops completely. Once you've got through that bust phase, you then just rest because obviously when things hurt, you naturally just don't want to train. You rest, and then without too much thought, you just go back straight into training again when that motivation goes up because your body's feeling good. And you just repeat that cycle over and over again. Why does this seem to be a problem for most active adults or fitness enthusiasts? Number one is because it logically seems like the right thing to do when you're injured. You stop, you rest, you let the pain go away, and then you go back into training again. And like I said, logically that's a great idea, but practically it's actually not the way to go about it. The real issue with taking this approach is that you're never actually going to improve your tolerance. And what do I mean by tolerance? Tolerance is that thing where you can tolerate a certain amount of work, and then over time, as you adapt to that work, you get fitter, and then you can slowly raise the bar and build up more work. But with this issue in the boom-bust cycle, that tolerance never improves, so we're never actually going to improve that tolerance because of all the rest we're having in between the boom cycles when we've busted. Because yes, rest reduces tissue irritation and pain potentially, but it doesn't increase tissue capacity. And when tolerance never improves, it's so easy to cross that line and you just keep going over it, having pain flare up, having injuries flare up, and then you're just repeating that process over and over again. What is the biggest mistake active individuals make when they're returning to training from a bit of a layoff? They go way too hard, way too early. They try to make up for lost time and they ramp that intensity straight up way too fast because they feel like they need to get things done quicker, having missed out on time. And that boom phase begins again. Why are driven athletes more susceptible to the boom-bust cycle? This is really common in driven athletes because they typically do like to work hard, which, as I've said before, is a great thing. But if we don't get the load management right, it can also be your downfall. Driven people tend to push really hard when they feel good. They'll ignore early warning signs that something is being overloaded. They tend to value their discipline over adjusting their training program, and they see backing off as some kind of weakness. And that's why the cycle can become self-reinforcing over time. What are the warning signs that you're the type of athlete who hits a boom-bust cycle? So these include a really good consistent training plan for 3 to 6 weeks, maybe 8. Then suddenly pain appears, or it could be something that's come in gradually over like a couple of weeks. Then when this pain hits, we're forced to have time off because our function goes down. And then when we return to training, it feels really good initially, but then pain comes straight back again. How do we go about breaking this cycle that these fitness enthusiasts, amateur athletes, and active adults come across. The things we don't want to do are continue to rest more. You don't need more rehab exercises, and you don't need more discipline. What you need is better load progression. What I mean by that is you need to start off at a lower level than where you're currently at. So if your tolerance is here and you're starting here, that's why we consistently see these symptoms flare up. So you need to bring it back a notch and start down here, and then you need to gradually work your way back up over time until you get to around about that tolerance level. And you should be tracking this objectively in some kind of diary or journal and writing down those things that you've done and how your body's responded to them. And then as we see tolerance go up over time, you can gradually increase your workload to meet that tolerance. And the real progress you're going to get out of training is when you're able to build tolerance to training load and you're able to manage load fluctuations. You avoid really large spikes in training load. You don't recover and get better from repeated resets over time. If you're an athlete who feels like this cycle sounds familiar to you, you're definitely not alone, because I see it all the time in the clinic when I'm working with patients. It's really common for people to come in and say, I'm just having this issue over and over again, and when you really dive into their history, they're doing that boom-bust cycle, even potentially just subtly. And it's extremely common, especially in motivated athletes. But the solution, like I said, is not to train less. It's to train smarter and with objective data so that you're not just making emotional decisions based on how your body is feeling. Thanks again, guys. If you have any comments, please post them below. I would love to chat further on this topic. If you liked the video, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'm looking forward to making more and seeing you in that next one.